So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague Melissa Caperton from myFutureNC.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Melissa Caperton. I serve as the Director of Regional Impact at myFutureNC. In this role, I have the privilege of working with local communities across the state as they are coming together around improving educational attainment. In just a moment, I will provide a very high-level overview of our organization and how we intend to approach work locally across the state before Emily and I jump into specifics about this exciting opportunity that we've partnered with on. But before that, I want to introduce our wonderful President and CEO, Cecilia Holden, who wanted to bring some words of greeting to you all who've taken the time to join us today. Cecilia?
Thanks, Melissa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to you for being here, for your interest in the work of myFutureNC, the state's educational attainment goal. Just thanks for showing up in the middle of the day. But recognizing that COVID has wreaked havoc on our education and workforce systems, I'd be remiss if I didn't just stop and give pause and personally thank each and every one of you for the significant investment and the contributions that you are making at the local level during this pandemic. Truly, truly thank you. I want to share warm greetings from my future and also from my friend, my colleague, my future NC Commissioner, Anita Brown-Graham. Anita couldn't be with us today, but we're super excited about the partnership that we formed with her and Emily and the ncIMPACT team at the UNC School of Government. North Carolina is very, very fortunate. We have a friendly business environment. We've got natural resources. All of this attracts top business. It attracts industry to the state, but the number one differentiator for site selectors when they're trying to decide where they want to locate a business is workforce talent. I'm excited that North Carolina recently received the top ranking by Site Selection Magazine in the 2021 Regional Workforce Development Rankings. And the rankings are to provide insight into what states are cultivating a workforce development culture that's relative to others in their geography. I have no doubt that achieving our educational attainment goal is going to be critical in keeping North Carolina at the top of the rankings. And this goal is only made possible with all of you. This cannot be done but for the support of our local communities across the state. You will hear this often, we're state-led, but the work has to happen and be locally owned and driven. So without each of you, we are not going to be able to meet the state's goal, but I have no doubt we will. We're super excited about the movement that the state is experiencing around the work, and it's amazing to see the energy that's going on at the local levels, and especially in the middle of this pandemic. We have almost 90% of all North Carolina counties that registered to be represented on the call today. That's huge, 90%. We've got lots of good work that's been underway, and we want to lift that work up. We also want to help others start collaboratives who possibly might need help getting something started in your local community. Educational attainment is the short-term recovery strategy coming out of this pandemic. It's the long-term resiliency plan for our state's economy. And all of this truly gives hope to the local communities. So I thank you for showing up. I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you for being with us today and for the continued excitement around the 2 million by 2030. Before I turn it over to Melissa, I just want to hit pause for a minute and extend a very special thank you to the John M. Belk Endowment, to MC Belk Pylon, for the generous support that allows this work to be made possible. I can't express enough gratitude to adequately share just how committed to the work that MC and her team are, have been, and will continue to be. MC had the vision, and the John M. Belk investment has provided for the opportunity that you're here to learn more about. I'm elated to see all this representation from across the state, and I'm so grateful for your interest. And with that, and without any further ado, I want to turn it back over to Melissa, who's going to share more with you about the local collaborative initiative. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Cecilia. For those of you who aren't familiar with myFutureNC, we are a statewide nonprofit organization that is focused on achieving the state's educational attainment goal, that 2 million North Carolinians between the ages of 25 and 44 will hold a high quality credential or post-secondary degree by the year 2030. And when we talk about educational attainment, I want to be abundantly clear that we don't only mean four-year degrees. We mean four-year degrees, two-year degrees, and high quality non-degree credentials that are valued by North Carolina employers and support North Carolinians in obtaining in-demand living wage jobs. And while the goal is focused on a certain point in time and a specific age group, I would really encourage y'all to think of it as a benchmark in our state's progress of creating a stronger, more economically competitive and prosperous North Carolina, where we're building a foundation of opportunity for all North Carolinians across the education to workforce continuum. If you'll go to the next slide, please, Emily. Building a shared vision for increased attainment is really part of the core of the work that we do at both the state and local level. Our strategic partner organizations are working to advance the state within specific channels, whether it's early learning, K-12, community colleges, four-year colleges and universities, or our workforce boards and employers. And they, for the most part, are operating under separate systems or umbrellas. But myFutureNC is looking at attainment from a system-wide approach to really build that shared vision for attainment across the entire education to workforce continuum, from pre-K through to a credential or post-secondary degree that aligns with workforce needs. Through data and tools like myFutureNC's county attainment profiles, and we could put a link to those in the chat. This is a tool that we encourage you to use in your application. There's also a link to it in the application. By building capacity and cross-sector collaboration at the local level, convening partners across sectors, disseminating effective practices, and leveraging our network at the state and local level to support policy change, myFutureNC is working to advance attainment for North Carolinians that's required to meet the needs of the workforce and to build a stronger North Carolina. We are going to launch a poll right now that I think will demonstrate what we mean when we say cross-sector collaboration and shared vision. If you will take a moment to answer the question that you see on your screen here regarding the sector that you represent: early learning, K-12, higher ed, local government, nonprofit, workforce or business, or other, and submit that, that would be great. And we'll give y'all a couple seconds to do that. See if those results will pop up. Wonderful. We've got a good mix of folks here with us today. Thank you all so much for joining us. That's fantastic. Emily, if you'll go to the next slide, please. So, the work that myFutureNC does statewide and with state level partners is obviously essential to our success. But as Cecilia said, we also very much recognize the critical role that local communities and leaders like yourselves will play in our state reaching the attainment goal and building that foundation of opportunity for all. There has to be ownership, buy-in, and attainment-focused efforts that are led locally if we're going to meet our 2030 goal. So that myFutureNC plans to hire a regional impact manager in each of the 8 prosperity zones that you see on the map here to help support local attainment efforts. This regional team will assist with the development and expansion of local attainment collaboratives, either within or across county lines, to help establish attainment goals locally, identify strategies and priorities to meet those goals, and work as partners of myFutureNC. We are, as I said, building out that team right now, and thank you, Lashika, for putting the link to the job descriptions that are out there if you all know folks who would be excellent at this work. We, again, are going to launch one more poll here. If you'll find your county on the map and the corresponding name of the prosperity zone in which you're located, we'd like to get a feel for the geographic representation of our attendees today. I'll go ahead and see what the responses are. Wonderful. Again, a nice mix. I think we've got all of the prosperity zones represented. Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Before we jump into this specific project, I did want to highlight our vision for local collaboratives. And that is that, local cross-sector leaders will come together around a common goal, a shared vision of increasing educational attainment. We will defer to locals on whether collaboratives are county-based or cross-county, but aim to have representation from that continuum: early learning, K-12, higher ed, workforce and business, local government, and other local stakeholders who are committed to improving attainment locally, serving on these local collaboratives. We aim to support collaboratives in being intentional about using data to make decisions, to help them understand where they are, where there's opportunities for growth, and prioritize strategies to help them reach their goals. Through toolkits, resources like the county attainment profiles that were just put in the chat, we aim to support a framework for local collaboratives that will help build beyond the geography of the area that's served by any given collaborative. My hope is through shared resources, identifying and scaling and replicating effective practices, that together we will create a statewide network of local attainment champions who are learning and sharing with one another. And then finally, we want to support local collaboratives in monitoring through data their progress in achieving their locally set goals and the impact that their implemented strategies and programming are having on moving the attainment locally. The work that we're doing in partnership with ncIMPACT is helping us launch this network of local collaboratives. While the opportunity we'll be highlighting today is limited to 10 collaboratives, we're continuing to explore funding opportunities to see if we can expand it to additional communities. But I want you to know and hear that regardless of whether your community is selected for this pilot project, myFutureNC is here to support your local efforts. While you may not be selected for this project, our regional team will be partners of yours, providing technical assistance and resources, as I just outlined, as y'all are working toward your attainment goals. So with that, let's jump in to the discussion about the opportunity that we are launching in partnership with ncIMPACT. If you'll go to the next slide, please, Emily. Thanks so much. So given the incredible response that Cecilia highlighted, almost 90% of counties across the state registering to join us today to learn more about the opportunity, it's clear, right, that increasing educational attainment in local communities has really resonated with local leaders across the state. Wanted to share a bit of data to provide some context. Prior to the pandemic, about 2/3 of jobs in North Carolina required a post-secondary degree or high-quality credential, but just under half of North Carolinians between the ages of 25 and 44 completed that level of education. We know, as Cecilia said, that the pandemic has created major disruptions across many areas, including immediate college enrollment. The class of 2020 saw a 21% decline in enrollment when compared to the class of 2019. That means that 1 in 5 of graduating seniors who we expected to show up on campus this past fall didn't. And enrollment declines are even higher for students who graduated from high schools who served low-income communities and those who are serving higher percentages of students of color. We also know that engaging students in a remote learning world has been difficult, and that there are some estimates that indicate the number of students who drop out could significantly increase. all of which could lead right to a bigger gap in what the workforce needs in terms of educational attainment and what the educational attainment achieved by workers is. So while this has always been a critical need, the pandemic has created, I think, some urgency around it. And as Cecilia said, increasing educational attainment is not only a short-term recovery strategy, but a long-term resiliency plan for North Carolina's economy. If you'll go to the next, thanks. So through generous support, again, we are so appreciative to the John and Belk Endowment for their support of this work. myFutureNC is partnering with the ncIMPACT initiative to identify 10 communities across the state that are working collaboratively to improve attainment locally. This network of 10 collaboratives will be sort of the launch pad for myFutureNC's network of local collaboratives. The approaches, the lessons learned from this network will help inform the creation of state-level resources to support other communities who are embarking on similar efforts. With that, I will turn it over to Emily, who will dive into some more details.
Thank you, Melissa. I promise not to read to you what's on the slides. I want to hit some highlights for each one. And all of this information is also available on our website. And a recording of the webinar will be posted on the website after this afternoon as well, in case you want to go back and revisit any of the information shared. So one of the key program benefits of participating in this initiative is the technical assistance that will be provided for each team by staff from myFutureNC and the ncIMPACT initiative at the School of Government, and also the access that you'll have to experts both within our state and across our nation about various practices and strategies that may be helpful to your community. We also see real value in the peer learning that will be a big part of this project. So we know from previous initiatives like this that the community collaboratives who participate find a great deal of value in the peer learning that they share between the other communities in the state. And you learn as much from each other as you do from any of us, maybe more. And finally, what we learned from this project will inform statewide policies. A lot of state policymakers who we've been engaged with in developing this launch are really excited about what they'll be able to learn from the 10 communities who pilot these various strategies and how that could inform state policies going forward. And finally, that you get the benefit of the funding that was generously provided by the Belk Endowment. Each collaborative will receive $25,000 to hire a project manager to keep their work moving forward and to invest in strategies that will help them implement their action plans. I know $25,000 sounds like a small amount, but I want to encourage you that we really intend those dollars to be leveraged. So the ncIMPACT initiative just recently completed a similar effort to help 10 local communities address the opioid epidemic and to mitigate the effects of the epidemic in their community. And in that instance, the funding, we provided $20,000 in funding to each team to get their work started, basically a seed funding. And they leveraged that work and the action plans that they developed to receive more than $4 million in additional funding from various local, state, and federal sources. So I want to encourage you that we see this as seed funding and that you'll be able to leverage that to get more dollars to support your local efforts. I think the only point I haven't mentioned on this slide is that we'll also develop a local attainment collaborative toolkit that'll include various tools that can be used by the 10 collaboratives selected for this program, but those will also be shared on our website and pushed out broadly through various channels to all communities in the state. So even if your community isn't selected to be one of the 10 collaboratives who participate in this specific program, you'll still have the benefit of all that we learn. We're going to share generously because we want everyone in the state to benefit from this work. So we hope you will apply, and I know some of you already have. We've already begun receiving completed applications. So wanted to go over the selection criteria. We're looking for communities, teams who've applied who have identified a core team composed of individuals from different sectors. We're looking to have folks from K-12, higher education partners, the workforce sector or particular businesses, as well as local government. We're looking for a demonstration of those stakeholders' commitment through at least 3 letters of support. We ask you in the application about your prior experience with educational attainment efforts. And we're looking for you to identify barriers that you've identified in your community to educational attainment. And then finally, we want to make sure the 10 collaboratives who are selected represent the diversity of our state, both in terms of geography, economic conditions, and demographic populations within the community. And finally, you have to apply as a team, not one individual organization. But that can look like many different things. You could apply as one county or a multi-county collaborative, or I know some folks have strong involvement from a municipality in their community. So a municipality can be your local government partner as well. Once, if you're selected to participate in the program, your core team that you've identified in your application will not be the extent of your collaborative in your local community. One of the first things that we do to support you is to help you with a stakeholder analysis to figure out who's missing and who needs to be added to your collaborative, and then to also help you with some engagement strategies to get those folks involved. We know from our previous work that sometimes it's hard to get the attention of some of the stakeholders that you need, and so we will help you to do that as well. We want to make sure that the local collaboratives represent a diverse team of stakeholders, including the folks who I mentioned earlier, and that the stakeholders are committed to participating in this 2-year project. It's really important to us that you find people who are willing to be in this work with you for the long haul, even though 2 years isn't really the long haul. There'll be more beyond that, but at least for this 2 years, we want to make sure they're committed. And we recognize that there are differences in the composition of different communities, and so the particular people who serve on each team can look very different. And so we want you to hear us say that we're not looking for a cookie cutter team, that we recognize that who's on your teams will look different in each community. So for the communities who are selected, the commitments that we're looking for from you are: one, we found in our work that it's really important that your community collaborative, your local team, meets frequently. We recommend monthly, but we know that may shift depending on availability and the flow of the work. But we recommend that you average meeting monthly. Those meetings can be in person or remote, especially in the current conditions that we're living in. We don't expect you to meet in person, but it'll really be up to your project manager, who your collaborative selects, to convene those meetings and to make sure the team keeps going with its work, and that information is being communicated to all the stakeholders, and that data is being collected, and basically be the backbone organization who keeps your community collaborative going. We're looking for you to leverage the existing assets and activities that you already have. We know you're already doing a lot of good work, and we've learned about even more of that in the last few weeks since we launched this call for applications. So we really want to help you leverage all the good work that you're doing to take you even further. We've set a baseline goal for each community to try to increase their educational attainment by 3%, but don't be startled by that. If your community is selected, and even if it's not, the myFutureNC staff are going to collaborate with each community to set an attainment goal for their county. And so that's kind of an average that we selected for the call for applications. But once we get into the program, each community will be assisted by myFutureNC to set a goal particular to their county. And then finally, it's really important to us and to the state of North Carolina that your efforts seek to increase equity in attainment. So we know from a lot of the research that's been provided by myFutureNC that there are a lot of disparities in who is attaining post-secondary credentials in our state, and we're really looking to improve the equity of who attains those credentials through this program. So here's a link to our application and the project page online so you can learn more information. All applications need to be submitted online by March 29th. We do have a PDF version of the application that you can print out or save on your computer to compile your responses before you input them online, because we know that can make things easier for you. And if you need a Word version, we'll even send that to you as well if you have trouble with the PDF. But please make sure to submit your information through the online application in order to be considered. So we've compiled some frequently asked questions that we've received so far and that some of you submitted in the registration form. So these next slides have a lot of text on them, but Melissa and I are going to take turns answering the questions that we've already received. And then we're going to go to the questions that you've submitted in the Q&A box. So I want to remind you again as we go through these, if you've got questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. We may get to them during this section, but if we don't, we'll answer those at the conclusion of this set of slides. So Melissa, take it away.
Wonderful. Well, we've gotten quite a few questions regarding the level of experience a collaborative should have. And our recommendation would be, if you are just now embarking on this work because of the application, because of this opportunity, if you don't have prior experience collaborating, this might not be the opportunity for you. That said, I do want to reiterate that our goal at myFutureNC is to support the development of collaboratives across the state. So while this opportunity and our partnership with ncIMPACT may not be the best fit for your community, if you're just beginning to explore collaboration across sectors around attainment, know that we are ready and willing partners to help you establish and implement a local attainment collaborative. Another great question that we've received is whether applicants have to be focused on a specific age range or group. As I stated earlier, we are approaching educational attainment from a shared vision across the entire education and workforce continuum, from pre-K through to a credential or post-secondary degree. We encourage collaboratives to let data drive where their focus area or areas are, and we will provide support in that work. But as long as the work is aligned with the goal of improving educational attainment, there are no requirements that collaboratives focus on a specific age range or group. We've also gotten some questions about who should submit the application and if entities can be on more than one application. Two also very good questions. First, there is no right applicant for this opportunity. We're looking for a champion to serve as the primary point of contact in your community, whether that's K-12, a local higher ed institution, workforce development board, a local government agency, or some other entity. Y'all know your community the best, and we will defer to you on who submits the application and serves as the primary point of contact. That said, we do recognize that several local partners may serve communities that stretch beyond a geography designated by a local collaborative. As an example, a community college, right, might serve, for example, a 4-county region. And leaders within those communities may decide that rather than establishing a 4-county collaborative, it makes best sense to them to have 2 collaboratives. In a situation like that, the community college that serves all 4 of those counties can be a named partner on both collaboratives. But for the application process, we would ask that they only serve as a primary point of contact for no more than one of them. And then finally, some questions around what we mean when we say post-secondary credential of value. As I said, we define that broadly: 4-year degrees, 2-year degrees, and high-quality non-degree credentials that are valued by North Carolina employers. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Emily.
So once we get all the applications in on March 29th, a team of folks representing the ncIMPACT initiative and myFutureNC will serve on the review team. And then from those, the applications that we receive, we'll select 15 to 20 finalists who will invite for an interview process. All applicants will be notified of their status by April 15th. At that time, we'll let some folks know that we'd like to proceed with an interview for their team, and we'll let other folks know that we can't accept them at this time, but we're going to be back in touch about how we can support their work going forward. If your team is selected for an interview, those will be conducted between April 19th and 30th. It'll take about half an hour, and we're looking for as many folks from your core team to participate in that interview as possible. My colleague will be doing the hard work of figuring out how to schedule those. And I promise we'll do our best to schedule it at a time when the most folks from your core team can attend. And then our plan is to announce in May the 10 teams who've been selected to participate in this inaugural class of the myFutureNC network. We've also received a question about whether communities who have limited employment opportunities are at a disadvantage in the application process. And the short answer is no. We understand that North Carolina is a diverse state with 100 counties that have very different conditions. And it could be that you're in a county or a larger community that really only has one or two employment sectors. And you don't have a lot of diversity in who your employers or your employment sectors are. And you're not at a disadvantage in this application process. Just make sure that you explain that to us in the narrative that you provide in your application. Some folks have asked if there's a calendar of the convenings for the program yet, and the short answer to that one is no as well. But I appreciate that you want to get them on your calendar and save the date ahead of time. With the pandemic and trying to figure out all that's going on in our world, we've got a rough outline of when the convenings will be, but aren't ready to commit dates yet. But just know that there will be 5 forums where we convene the 10 teams together running from July 2021 until December 2022. And we'll share those specific dates with the teams selected as soon as we can. Some folks have asked about whether the forums will be in person. Our hope is to hold the forums in person, but we recognize the conditions that we're all living in. And if it's not safe to gather in person, the convening will be done virtually, remotely. And then some folks have had a question about the 3% attainment goal that was identified in the call for applications. Again, we set that as a preliminary goal for each community, but if you're selected for the program, folks from myFutureNC will work with you to set a specific goal for your community in collaboration with you. And they'll also do that with other counties around the state who aren't selected for this program as well.
We understand that several of you are coming to this application with a wealth of experience in terms of your local attainment efforts, and have gotten questions about what should be highlighted in the application. We will defer to you on what you want to highlight, but would encourage you to consider including things like what partners have been involved in your work, the role each partner has played, any goals you may have set, and outcomes that were achieved. And another really good question around what happens if goals are not met at the end of the 2 years, and whether funds would have to be paid back if goals are not met, I should say. And the short answer to that is no. Our goal with this project is to partner with each collaborative to help set local goals, to support identification and implementation of strategies and priorities, to move toward achieving those goals and help monitor your progress in getting there. But there will not be a penalty for not achieving established goals. In terms of what is required of selected collaboratives, hopefully a lot of that has been answered on previous slides. But as Emily said, we are looking for active commitment over the 2-year project in both the larger network of the 10 collaboratives that are selected for this opportunity through participation in those forums, sharing of effective practices, and data to measure progress. But we also want the commitment to be reflective in active engagement at the local level with partners who are engaged with the collaborative through the monthly meetings and participation where appropriate in the identified strategies and practices. In regard to those monthly meetings, those are for the local collaboratives. They will be led and scheduled by the collaborative's project manager. ncIMPACT and myFutureNC welcome invitations to join those as needed. So don't hesitate to include us in those, but those are owned locally. And then finally, a question around local collaboratives, whether they get to select their project manager. And the answer to that is yes, and is actually a great segue back over to Emily, who will talk more about that role.
So a follow-up question that we've also received from some folks is whether the funds designated for a project manager, excuse me, could be used for a different purpose. And the answer to that is that the role and responsibilities of the project manager are really critical to the success of this work. And also who you select to perform that role for your community, it will be really critical to the success of your work. The project manager serves as the primary liaison with the ncIMPACT initiative and myFutureNC, and they really serve as your backbone organization, if you're familiar with the collective impact model within your community, who will make sure to keep the work keeps moving forward, who will convene the folks on your collaborative, who will share information with various stakeholders, make sure folks remain engaged, will share data about to help you measure your progress towards your goals, and to basically help implement the strategies that you identify for your community. So because of the critical role that that person plays, we're hesitant to say that the funds could be used for another purpose. But if your community is selected to be one of the 10, we would be open to talking with you more about that and getting more specific details about how you would assure us that those funds would be used in a way that wouldn't detract from the importance of that role, and that those responsibilities were going to be covered. We thought it would be helpful to share a little more about the role of the project manager. So as I said, that person's the primary liaison to our team who's coordinating this effort at myFutureNC and the ncIMPACT initiative. We expect the person to spend about 5 to 10 hours each week on this work. So this isn't a full-time role. So you could select someone who's already an existing employee and basically commit a portion of their time to this work and use the funds that we provide to cover that portion of the person's salary. You could hire an independent contractor to serve in that role, somebody who's just looking for that sort of 5 to 10 hour a week commitment of work, or you could come up with some other employment scenario, but those are the two that come to our mind. We want it to be flexible and for it to be somebody that your community identifies and trusts. So as I've mentioned, this person will convene your monthly meetings, help communicate between the folks at ncIMPACT and myFutureNC with your team, help to connect your team with resources to perform your work. And they'll also be supported by our team who's coordinating this effort through a monthly or somewhat monthly call with the other project managers. So all 10 teams will have a project manager. And in our previous efforts like this one, we've found in our evaluation that the project managers found it really helpful to connect with the other project managers across the state to share resources and to learn from each other, or to share challenges that they're coming up with that they're encountering, and to work on solutions together. So we're happy to provide that service for this program as well. And then finally, the person will be responsible for the data around the performance measures, the shared measures that your collaborative adopts, that will help you track your progress toward the fulfillment of the goals that you set for your local community. So as I've said, each collaborative will get to choose their project manager. We're happy to help you if you need help identifying somebody or thinking through who would be best for your community. But we really want somebody who's familiar with your community and the stakeholders. It's important that they're experienced with facilitation and that they're able to help guide you in the implementation of the strategies that you set for your community. And you want somebody who's a good project manager, somebody who's detail oriented and is going to make sure tasks get completed and help hold everybody accountable for what they said they would do. And finally, you want somebody who will either have or be able to earn the respect of the folks on your community team.
Great. We have just a few more frequently asked questions that came in. We'll cover before heading over to see if there's any in the Q&A that we haven't yet addressed. We've received questions as to whether a mix of community locations, for instance, rural and urban within the same collaborative, would be preferred over, for instance, a collaborative that is focused solely on rural areas. And our response is that we are looking for geographic diversity across the collaboratives, not necessarily within them. We will defer to you on the right communities to engage in your local collaborative. And there's no preference from our standpoint on whether that includes rural, urban, and/or suburban communities, or focuses on just one specific geographic type. In terms of funding and the flexibility around it, we've received several questions regarding specific asks of what it could potentially be used for. The broad answer, broadly speaking, those funds can be used to support the costs associated with implementation of the strategies that the collaborative has identified to achieve the goal. And again, our team is happy to help answer any other specific questions, but broadly speaking, the implementation funds, as long as they're aligned with a strategy that helps achieve the goal, would be allowable. Does the grant support programs focused on specific groups? Along those same lines, we will support collaboratives in identifying specific opportunities for growth locally and strategies to achieve the local community's attainment goals. So again, as long as the strategies align with the goal of increasing attainment, and our identified strategy of the collaborative, then grant funds can be used to support implementation of those strategies. We've received some questions about whether certain roles in the community are eligible to be part of the team. As you build your team, we encourage you to engage a broad range of committed stakeholders in these efforts, including from this question, school board members, if that makes sense to your community. Part of the technical assistance, and Emily highlighted this a bit for collaboratives that are selected, is they will receive support in identifying what other community stakeholders need to be at the table. So don't feel like you have to have your full team built at the time of application. There will be additional opportunities to bring partners to the table. And then likewise, the last question on this slide, for the application and collaborative, this is asking whether school districts should be part of it or individual schools. For the collaborative in the application, the school district or districts need to be engaged. For specific strategies and practices that are implemented as part of the collaborative work, we do encourage school level staff and collaboration where appropriate, but again, for the application, it needs to be a district level partnership. And then the final question to close out on before we move over to any questions that may have come through the Q&A box. How can my community remain engaged if we aren't selected for the network? Again, I think this is the third time I've said it, but the opportunity that we're talking about today is limited to 10 collaboratives. However, the resources, the strategies, the lessons learned will all inform and be available to the larger local network of myFutureNC collaboratives that we're supporting statewide. Your application, even if it isn't selected, is an opportunity for our team to connect with you and your local team to support the establishment or expansion of a cross-sector attainment collaborative work. So consider this the start of a partnership, regardless of whether you're part of this pilot network. And with that, I think we can go over to the Q&A to see if there are any other questions that came in.
And thank you all for submitting questions in the Q&A box. We do have some to address. We'll say again that the recording of the webinar today will be shared online, and the slides can also be available to you too. There's also a frequently asked questions document that was posted on the website this morning that you can reference as well. So all of the FAQs that we just went through are available with responses in that document. The first question that I'll pose from the audience is, if school districts team up, how will that impact the funds available if selected, and how will educational attainment be calculated? The answer to the first part of the question is that we're limited to $25,000 for each collaborative. And I'd like to ask Jenny Korn if she wants to talk about how the educational attainment will be calculated.
So, oh, and I'll turn my camera on. Hey y'all, I've been trying to keep up with the Q&A as we've been going, and so hoping that as I was doing this, folks were seeing the responses. Were those coming through? Does anybody know? Yes, no? Yes, okay, good. Thank you, Brett. So relating to the setting goals, I mean, basically we've been working to calculate out goals at the county level. I think it's really up to the collaborative, like having some conversation about what that looks like at the local level, because we were really thinking about it for the 2030 goal for the county level. But I think at the collaborative level, if you have a regional collaborative and y'all want to set a regional goal, really up to you guys, really working through and in partnership with myFutureNC and with the School of Government to do what kind of makes the most sense for your community. But I think that there's some flexibility, and I think we also can use the work that we've been doing over the past year as at least a starting place.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you and Will for helping to answer questions live in the chat in the Q&A box as well. The next question is, what are the sectors that you typically feel should be represented? So the ones that are required for the application are a K-12 school system, a higher education partner, it could be community college or a university, a workforce or business partner, so it could be somebody from your workforce board or your economic development organization or a particular employer, and then finally a local government partner. But of course, we recognize that there are a lot of other sectors who could be valuable to this work in your community, including early learning, various support services that are important to students to be able to pursue post-secondary credentials. So Melissa, do you want to add any of those? There's also a list of those potential ones online as well.
I was just going to say, in the application, we've got a list of other folks to consider. I think it's on the second to last page of the application in the PDF.
So the next question is, how do we approach funding for higher education degrees? Is that part of what our collaborative needs to solve? That's the largest barrier in our experience to college access. And the answer is, we recognize that affordability and finances are one of the biggest barriers to students pursuing post-secondary credentials, and that may be a barrier that your community wants to tackle, and we would be happy to work alongside you in working to find solutions to that barrier. Melissa, do you want to add anything on that one?
I think that's
Do you want to mention the FAFSA completion challenge?
Sure, absolutely. We can put a link into the chat. We have recently launched tools to support FAFSA completion locally. So certainly if that's a need of your community, we've got some excellent resources out on ncfirstandfafsa.com, including a tracker, a challenge where schools are eligible for $500 First and FAFSA grants, as well as linking over to CFNC's Finish the FAFSA that has student level data.
The next question is, are you looking to connect the increase in attainment to this specific initiative? And if so, how will you be able to measure the impacts? So we do want to be able to evaluate and document that there were increases in attainment because of this initiative. So as I said, each community is going to set an attainment goal for their community that they'll measure against. And then, of course, myFutureNC and data gurus like Jenny Korn will be measuring data at the statewide level for all the local communities as well. And then an important part of our program is that we've got an evaluation team who are helping us identify shared measures for all 10 collaboratives to measure and work toward. And also, but then in addition to those shared measures across the 10 teams, each collaborative will be able to establish and identify some of their own local measures that reflect what's important to them to document the impact of this work. The next question is about the application. Are the 3 letters of support for the application from the core team members or other stakeholders? Those letters of support should come from people who are part of your core team, or at least the organizations represented by people from your core team. Next question. A question about the deadline for submitting applications. Again, it is March 29th. It looks like somebody tried to scare you and tell you it was March 15th, but it is March 29th. So please do make sure to submit your application by that date online. Another question, are you or will you be able to capture, count industry recognized credentials earned by high school students? Yes, certainly we want to count credentials that are earned by high school students. And we think that's a great strategy for increasing educational attainment. Melissa, do you want to add anything on that one?
I was going to see if Jenny wanted to touch at all on what counts in terms of a high quality credential, the work that's happening at the state level.
Yep, and so I think that it's exciting to think about these collaboratives working in partnership with us to roll out. We've been doing some work at the state level. Many of the folks on the call have been involved in this, helping the state to identify kind of a prioritized list of non-degree credentials that help North Carolinians earn family sustaining wages. So non-degree, these are less than an associate's degree, but really working with our employers, community colleges, workforce boards to think about in our state, what are the degrees that our employers value most and how can we help local communities provide opportunities for folks to earn those at the local level. So that's absolutely part of this work. We're still kind of building it, figuring out how to measure it, how to collect and count how folks are earning those. So that work is going on, and it will absolutely be woven in, I think, to the partnership with the collaboratives.
Thank you, Jenny. The next question is, would the project manager need to be a new position, or can we dedicate the time of a current employee? So once again, it could be an existing employee and you dedicate a portion of their time, or you could hire someone new to do this work as a part-time employee or an independent contractor. We're really flexible about what the employment circumstances look like. Then a good suggestion, can you help us connect to others who are on this call in our region? That might be a good way to connect with stakeholders that they may not be thinking about yet. So that's one of the benefits of being part of this network, is that we would like to help connect you with folks in your region. Whether you're selected to be one of the 10 collaboratives or not, we promise to help do that work with you. A question about how involved a representative from local industry can be. Melissa, I think they're tired of my voice. You want to take that one?
Absolutely. We do want business at the table for these opportunities. And certainly, again, we'll defer to local communities on what those businesses are and what colleagues to bring to the table. But yes, we would want them to be an active part of any local collaborative. In terms of how long are the project manager meetings with the regional manager, I think with the ncIMPACT and myFutureNC monthly meetings, how long were those typically, Emily?
Less than an hour.
Less than an hour.
And they're encouraged but not required. So it's less than an hour once a month for the project manager calls.
Great. I think a couple of more came in. Sounds like for the application entry, the assembly of teams are flexible. If selected, you all will make additional recommendations of possible stakeholders. Is this correct? Yes, although again, we do ask that part of the core team is higher ed, K-12, workforce and business, and a local government representative. But again, we'll defer to communities on others to bring to the table. And we have a good list of suggested partners to consider in the application. And then there was another question that just disappeared. Where did that go? Is it possible to split the project manager funding up to have stipends for points of contact in all 3 school districts and the college? So for that question, I think, we really see the project manager as a key role in this work, and would encourage the funding to be exclusively for the project manager. But if there's other ways to approach the work locally, we're certainly open to those conversations, but very much want to make sure that we have a project manager established for each collaborative. Do you want to add anything to that, Emily?
No, only that, as I would just say, as we mentioned earlier, we are open to talking about it if your community is selected. That's all the questions I see. Does anybody else see any we've missed? One more question about the letters of support. So the letters of support should come from organizations who are represented in your core team. We recognize it might not come from the person who's serving on your core team. Perhaps you want your letter to come from like the chief executive of that organization. But yes, the letter should come from organizations who are represented on your core team. Thank you all for all this engagement and for asking these great questions. We really are so excited by the level of interest in this application process, and we look forward to seeing lots of applications from you. We wanted to share our contact information one last time, so you can reach out to me or Melissa or Anita. Our email addresses are here with questions, and we've got one last poll we want to launch before we go. So after all that you've heard in the last hour, we're curious to know what appeals to you most about this program. Is it the cross-sector collaboration, the forums and the peer learning opportunities from folks across the state, the technical assistance that'll be provided by myFutureNC and the ncIMPACT initiative, the funding? It's okay if you choose the funding. We all know how important money is. Making progress toward the attainment goal for your community and the state, or the opportunity to apply evidence-based practices toward the fulfillment of that goal. So Cecilia Holden is going to be excited to know that your #1 interest is making progress toward the attainment goal for our state and your community. That's good news. Thank you all again for joining us today, especially at the lunch hour. We're excited to collaborate with you, whether you're one of the 10 collaboratives selected, or whether we can support your work as part of our larger efforts in the state. We stand ready to help you however we can. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you all.